This is Cold Start.
And so we went up to the Pacific Northwest not too long ago. We talked about Northwest exotics, and we have our live walk-around episode that we posted a couple weeks ago. But there's more to the story. There's more to tell.
Yeah, it all started at Monterey for the Monterey Motorsports reunion. Watching the vintage Formula One races. We were watching the IROC cars out there racing. It was a fantastic time. If you haven't had a chance, check out that episode all about the Monterey Motorsports reunion and our feelings about it. But from that, we took the Toro Rosso Formula One car on the road, and we transported it directly from Monterey up to the Pacific Northwest for the upcoming Northwest Exotic Show. And that was also its own episode, as Sylas just alluded to, our walk around looking at the cars at this really nicely curated event. Maybe about 80 cars total on display in this beautiful setting overlooking the marina in Kirkland, Washington. The reason we went up there was to bring the Formula One car, but there was a pre-event.
Yeah, and the pre-event, Chapter 1, which I think is such a cool labeling of this pre-event. And the pre-event was more exclusive. It was more curated. It was hosted at a private residence. And Tom Fathy, who we've had on the show, did an incredible job of what this pre-event was. And so we want to kind of take you guys through what this event was all about, kind of go through the sights and sounds and what, in my opinion, made for an experience, an automotive experience like no other.
Tom told me about this pre-event that was going to be happening, and I thought, okay, some kind of dinner party at a private residence out there in Washington. Sounds nice, but I don't know if it's worth all the logistics and headaches of bringing the car to this thing and then the next day having it being displayed for the Northwest Exotic Show. But then I got the invitation, and it says, Chapter 1, Pacific Sunset. Like, this sounds like it's a lot more built up than I thought it was going to be. This doesn't just sound like dinner under a tent at some dude's house. And then the display for this item, I could maybe make out the silhouette of this car. It looked familiar, but I wasn't 100% sure what it was. So we got the invitation, we signed up, and we said, okay, we'll RSVP and come to this thing. And we did arrange for the Toro Rosso Formula One car to be transported to this private residence so that it could be part of this even more curated display.
Yeah, and before we get into the show itself and some of those details and how unbelievable the setting was, part of our journey to get there, obviously we flew up to Seattle and we had a rental car. As car individuals, we couldn't get just the normal Hertz rental. We had to get something a little bit more interesting. And I think originally we had reserved a brand new BMW 5 Series. That was the plan.
Yeah, that was the plan. But as you know, when you rent a rental car from some agency, you show up there and they're like, oh, yeah, it was one of these types of cars. It wasn't exactly that one car. But then they thought they were doing us a favor and they kicked us the upgrade.
Oh, yeah. So we got the upgrade. So rather than a 5 Series, we got upgraded to the 7 Series.
The Luxo barge, current model 7 Series BMW. And it was an interesting car. I mean, it was certainly comfortable. I mean, that's what this thing's about, right?
Yeah, I think both of us had a pretty cynical mindset going in, even when we were like, oh, yeah, let's do a 5 Series. Like, let's see how terrible it is, right? I think both of us had that mindset of like, oh, we don't really agree with what BMW's doing for the most part for their basic vehicles. And so the 7 Series, I think both of us looked at it and were like, oh, yeah, this thing, this terribly, like, gross-looking outside 7 Series. I mean, I think the E38, the mid-2007 series, is one of the most gorgeous cars, period, not just within BMW, but in general. And their most modern 7 Series is nowhere near gorgeous or glamorous in any sort of way. So I think we were both really excited to experience it and maybe be overly critical of it.
One of the best parts is you don't have to look at the front grille when you're inside it. So we didn't have to think about that at all.
Yeah. No, getting behind the wheel and driving it for the first little bit, I mean, the interior was kind of cool. Like, it felt a little gimmicky that there was so many screens and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was what you would want a 7 Series to be. Roomy, comfortable, nice, plush leather seats. But as soon as you start to get that thing moving, you're like, I feel like I'm operating a landmass. Like, this thing is massive. In regards to, like, a big sedan, I felt like I was in more so a mid-sized SUV. That thing was so big.
You could feel the thing floating along on the road. It was super supple in sort of all of its dimensions. It wound up being a really nice thing to be driven around in. So thanks for that, Sylas.
You're very welcome. I enjoyed my time behind the wheel. And it wasn't slow. Like, it actually did perform pretty well. I think both of us came in with a mindset of like, this thing's going to be so dumb. Like, it's going to be ridiculous. And in a lot of ways, it was, in terms of its size, and like trying to maneuver that thing around into any sort of parking lot was just moronic, right? And that was a vehicle that you could tell just belonged on the highways and long-term cruising and stuff like that. But this long-winded review, to kind of put one of the points that I found, which was the most funny, was there's different emotion settings that you can put the 7 Series in. So if you go through the infotainment menu system, you can change it from things like energetic to quiet to sporty to
relaxed.
Right. It was just all over the place. And every time that you would change the setting, inside, all of the trim was like this faux crystal whatever, right?
It's like bezel that went across the whole front dash.
But it was backlit. So when you would change the mood of the vehicle, it would do this whole like light show into a different lighting dynamics. And then if you wanted like quiet, and that was the mood that you were in, it would also raise up all of the shades, close the moonroof, do all of these things. And it was kind of like, it was kind of cool. Like, I'm not going to lie, like, I did feel like it was kind of gimmicky, but I really enjoyed going through the different moods and how it changed stuff. And then, like, if you put it into sport mode, it kind of, like, increased the bolsters, tightened the seatbelt, and, like, did a little, like, growl of some kind. It was kind of hysterical.
Yeah, it was all about creating this sort of experience. And if you're getting that kind of car, it's first and foremost for comfort, for being able to transport several people around. But they really did a nice job, I have to say, with integrating those different feels and experiences into the car. In a way, it was pretty gimmicky. And, you know, there's plenty of cars that'll change the backlighting on the dashboard or the speedometer background or trim or the way the instruments are displayed on the cluster if you go into different modes. But this did it in a really kind of seamless and integrated way that I thought was pretty well thought out. It's maybe not where I'd spend my time and energy if I was looking for a car, but if you had the opportunity to ride around in one, you might as well play with the buttons.
Yeah, no, it felt like a pretty immersive experience, especially when you were rolling around at night. But I agree with you. The review of the 7 Series ends with this. It was cool. I really enjoyed my time in it. Would I spend my money on a car like that in today's market? No, absolutely not. Like, that's not a car for me. I don't think that's a car for a car enthusiast, but it was kind of cool to experience, and it's a different age of BMW.
It's the thing where there's all that technology that's sort of leading edge of the car. And just like all other technology, at some point it's going to be outdated, probably in about 2 or 3 years. So you might feel like you have this whiz-bang kind of cool thing, and then it's going to seem really outdated and retro at some point, and things will start breaking. And that's not to say they're not well engineered, but it's just that's the nature of technology in cars. So if that's the leading edge of things, you better find something else to make more interesting.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to Chapter 1, Pacific Sunset, the pre-show, the pre-event to Northwest Exotics. So now this private event, which was going to be the day before the Northwest Exotics at Carillon Point.
Yeah, in Kirkland. This private residence was in Mercer Island, Washington. So for those that are less familiar, Lake Washington's this big body of water that's there between the Seattle side of the world, on which the other side is the Puget Sound, right? Not just the ocean there. Lake Washington is there and separates Seattle from what they call the east side. And out in the middle of that lake is this big landmass called Mercer Island, which is full of all kinds of fancy houses, and it's mostly residential. There's not all of anything really commercial there. But this particular residence was right on the side of the lake, and it turns out was a conglomeration of 7 different private residences that previously existed that this individual purchased, effectively leveled them, and started anew with this housing development of his own. Built this amazing indoor-outdoor experience site where you drive in through the front gate, down a long circular driveway that had plenty of room for all kinds of vehicles. Wasn't too steep. They were obviously thinking about potentially low or high scrape factor kind of vehicles coming through this thing. It was just well sculpted out and onto these beautiful grounds, right? It was just so well set in the environment. You could see the trees all around Seattle. You could get a glimpse out to the lake from the entry point. You felt like you were entering an estate.
Just the place that this show was hosted at was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, obviously, the home itself was quite large. The garage was massive of where this individual held his own personal collection. But then also, like, the surrounding area. I mean, the lawns, the grasses, the terraced lawns, right? There was multiple levels, just the architectural beauty of just some of the shapes of buildings and things like that. Like everything about where this location was just drop dead gorgeous. There was unbelievable flowers and just beautiful things of this space in general. And it seemed like an elevated outdoor museum is the best way I could describe it. It didn't even seem like a home. Like it just seemed like another dimension.
Yeah, everything was super well curated and I'll say manicured. All of the plants and wildlife and flowers that were there. The garages themselves were sort of set up to be indoor-outdoor. So there weren't any apparent garage doors or sliding doors or anything like that you could see. Everything just seemed like it was open to the elements, which of course out there in Seattle, it can't be and it's not. But it was just that well built and designed such that the ways to kind of secure it and close it up were all integrated and they weren't really visible.
So we enter into this event and we didn't make it too far into the event before we were already captured by the vehicles that were on display. So we're talking about the grounds. Drop dead gorgeous, obviously car people. We're interested in the cars that are on display there as well. So we walk into this event and you got to walk down to where the main house is and kind of where the main festivities are, but there's some cars on display before you get down there. And on the upper level terrace in the grass, already caught our eyes are two BMW 507s.
Yeah, an unreal scene. These are the kind of cars that very few people have the fortune in their lifetimes to ever even see one of these. These are cars from the 1950s. They didn't make very many of them. Iconic design, the basis for many derivative cars that followed. And here are two pristine examples just sitting out in the open on the lawn on this high terrace area, just for anybody to come up and look at or check out. It was an amazing thing just to see those in the flesh next to each other.
Yeah, and then that was that throwback to what you were talking about with that invitation. There was a silhouette of a car that looked quite familiar, and then it was like, oh, that's a 507, and here's two of them. And then on this area of lawn, those two cars were then accompanied by a Ferrari 250 and a Ferrari Nart Roadster. I mean, like, once again, another two additional unbelievable cars. And then, oh yeah, of course, there was a Mercedes SLS Roadster amongst them as well, all sitting on the lawn together, overlooking the rest of the event. It was pretty hard to continue to move on because there were so many things that caught your eye.
It was a really impressive scene. The way things were laid out was really well established as well, or should I say, the way things were laid out was really sensible and designed, obviously. The placement of the cars, the angle of the cars, the distance between the cars so that you can get up, be close to a single car and not, be bumping up to something next to you. It was all spaced out really well. I think there was the 300 SL Roadster there, not the gull wing that people see normally, but the one with the drop top on it. So you had several of these cars that were, drop top cars. And we've talked about this before, how, certain convertibles aren't really held in the same high regard or esteem as other cars because they're less rigid in the body or there's other compromises that have been made. But in these cases, these were sort of like the pinnacle example of these cars, with the exception of that one hardtop, the 250 GT that was there. Mm-hmm. They were all drop tops and they were impeccable. They were clean, they were pristine, yet they were still period correct. They didn't look like they were fresh off a resto mod. These were well-preserved cars that had been well taken care of.
Oh, and they smelled it too. I mean, they smelled of the era. And at this event, I would say, there weren't that many cars in total, if you don't count the gentleman's personal collection in his own garage. But the cars that were on display, there weren't that many, but you could tell each one was picked out specifically for a reason, and each individual car was just an absolute show-stopping halo car, whether it was because it was a classic or because of its exclusivity or because of it being a hypercar, whatever it was. Each car was so perfectly placed in this environment. I honestly felt like I was walking through a museum. You walk up to each piece of art, each car, and you're just taking in the environment of which it's set in, the beauty of it itself. It took a long time to walk through and work our way through this event just because everything was just so beautifully put together. It was something that was beyond anything I've ever experienced within the automotive world of going to so many different automotive events and car shows and stuff like that. This was to the 10th degree.
Yeah, and of course there was a dinner party going on throughout this, right? Kind of a cocktail hour thing. So you had people circulating with the hors d'oeuvres and drinks. You had people that were just meeting each other and having their little social moments. And all the while they're among these grounds of this amazing property where it's just littered throughout, tastefully done with these amazing cars that you'd be fortunate to see ever in your life and just collected and sort of scattered around on the property. So there was a BMW M1 right on the driveway as you walk down next to those terraced areas. There was the Toro Rosso Formula One car on a little back driveway area between what looked like a home office setup and the garage that was belonged to the gentleman, with the background of Lake Washington, with the background all the way in the distance of the Olympic Mountains. It was such a breathtaking scene to be able to take in these cars. It really made you realize the art and the artistry of these vehicles. Yes, we always talk about the reason we have cars is so that we can drive them. But these are the kinds of cars that you can appreciate on such another level. And the way they were presented, it was tasteful, it was civilized, it made us feel fancy. I have to say, I walked into this thing not knowing entirely what to expect. Like, am I going to be wearing the right clothes for this thing? And everybody just came as they were. But wow, what a feeling it was being, it was like you said, walking around an open air museum where the environment and these cars and the people were sort of all just intermingled in a way that just felt right.
Yeah, no, I felt a little out of place as well, of like how fancy this place was and all of these cars and all the other people that were there. But like you said, it was kind of like there was no judgment. We were all there hanging out and enjoying the space, which was so great and refreshing, right? I think we've all have been to one of those events where you might feel like, do I belong here? And you kind of start sweating a little bit. But this was just such an unbelievable event and such welcoming, opening arms from everyone that was there. Speaking of that BMW M1, I remember once again staring at the car for way too long, and the backdrop of which this M1 was sitting in, it was kind of isolated by itself off to the side, but the background, it looked like a BMW advertisement. Like if you look at those old BMW ads where it almost looks like it's in like industrial kind of backdrop, modern architectural design, that was this. And I was like, I felt like I was standing in a BMW ad for like the M Heritage line or something like that. It was just such a cool feeling.
It was definitely otherworldly. It had that sense to me of like, imagine you're at this little outcropping where there's maybe some columns or like a little pond. You're somewhere outside Rome in the forest, and there's this little outcropping where on this pad, there's a BMW M1 just sitting there, reflecting the trees around it, just outside. The light was just spectacular. This was like 5:30 in the afternoon on a summer day that was beautiful and clear out in Seattle. It was just such a breathtaking scene. I mean, the superlatives will run out before we're at the end of this episode, so apologies for us repeating ourselves. But just the amazing, I don't even know what to say.
I'll start flipping through the pages of a thesaurus.
Let me go get a thesaurus. Hold on a second. The grandeur of this setting, no, it was real. It felt like these cars were at home. This was a perfect place to showcase these cars all together. And then, let alone, let's talk about this individual's collection of cars that also happened to be at the property. And at first, it wasn't clear that those were somehow separate because, again, it was this indoor-outdoor garage kind of setting so that you could walk in and out of the area. But then you realized all of these cars all in a line, they didn't all have something in common, but what they had in common was, of course, they were collected and owned by this individual. A lot of Porsches, a lot of early Porsches. I'd say the sort of 60s through early 80s were very well represented. But then, of course, there were plenty of cars from later than that into the 90s and 2000s and beyond. Then there were a couple of odd ducks, things that just showed up in the mix for reasons we couldn't really understand. And at that point, I think it sort of dawned on me, like, wait a minute, these have to all belong to the guy, because why else would there be that car among all of these other cars when everything else is so decoratively and artfully arranged?
When you looked at this individual's garage, it looked like a bag of Skittles of Porsches. I mean, the colors that were represented were unbelievable. And I guess I should look into Porsche colors to be able to describe them accurately. But there was some like faded yellows. I'm a BMW guy, so I'm going to say Dakar yellow. It looked like a Dakar yellow Porsche, which was an unbelievable color. But my favorite was this like metallic mist color that was like this very light, dusty blue-green mix. And it was just like colors on Porsches I had never seen before. Then I'm like, okay, yeah, this is obviously like a very rare colored Porsche, and like the deep greens and like the bright oranges, like it had everything, and on unbelievable cars too. And oh yeah, there was like a gold metallic Singer too, just to add into the mix.
You know, in case you didn't get your fill with all the old classic Porsches of tasting the rainbow as you went, right? So yeah, from the old to the modern. There were a couple other ringers in the mix. I seem to remember, what was it, an old Oldsmobile?
I think it was. Yeah,
Or it was a Buick? I don't remember. I think it was an Oldsmobile. It had that big 70s body, like early 70s body. Convertible. And it looked like, the way my dad used to describe cars like that, he'd say, that's a cream puff right there.
Oh yeah, that thing is floating along the freeway for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. And again, amidst these other cars where you wouldn't normally see these things together, unless it was somebody who was an enthusiast who collected all different types of cars and had them together. And my understanding is this is a person who buys cars to drive them, not to collect or hoard them or put them in a museum. They're all in range for being pulled out of this driveway and taken out on the road.
Which is so cool. I mean, you hear about so many people that have such large collections, and I guess logistically it is quite complicated to be able to drive everything or drive all your cars all the time. I can definitely understand that. But it's cool to see individuals that have beautiful collections and plenty of cars, and to hear that they actually still get them out on the road, it is unbelievable.
What a cool problem to have too, right? Okay, your collection's so large that you need to plan to make the rotation so that cars don't sit for too long, or, you know, don't have some kind of deficiency because they're not being used. And we know old cars like this, they want to be used, they need to be used. And this setting for them, I mean, the Porsche 993 era Carrera RS, that GT2 styled car,
oh, there's two of them.
The dark blue metallic. You mentioned colors, and it kind of dawned on me. There were two of the early AC Cobra, Shelby Cobra cars. One of them in that sort of very classic sort of blue-silver color, like you see a lot of them, in impeccable shape, with this signature on the front of the dash that's unmistakably says Carroll Shelby on it. And then the other one, it had a little placard on it. It was the only car that I saw there that had a little sign that said effectively, you know, please don't touch. The car was bronzed. Now, it wasn't copper, and it wasn't brass, and it wasn't like a metallic wrap or foil on this car. It was bronzed. I can't think of any other way to describe the shine on this thing, the luster it had. There was a warmth to the color on it, the way it caught the light in this Pacific sunset, as the event was named, with the trees in the background, with the side exhaust pipes. It just looked the part of this event. It was so amazing to see. It looked like something right out of a museum. I don't know how you could possibly use this car and keep it up so well. Just the finish on the thing, the metallic sheen to it, the way it showed off the lines on the car. It wasn't like anything else I've ever seen.
Yeah, another one of the cars that was kind of the centerpiece for the event, besides the F1 car, right? That was kind of displayed right in the middle of where all the individuals were walking around. But there was also a Pagani Utopia. And now this Pagani Utopia that was basically positioned in kind of a junction of where the driveway came together. It was fully opened up. And what I mean by that is that the rear clam, the front clam, and the doors, everything was wide open on the car. So you got to see all the beautiful details of where Pagani spends a lot of its energy, right? Like even in the engine bay, you can see where they've lined up the carbon weave, stuff that like doesn't matter and you don't need to do, and it takes way too much time and energy to accomplish successfully. And we got to see all of these details just so beautifully presented. And this event too, most car events you go to, it's very difficult to get kind of a clear shot of a car, like take a clean photo of a vehicle without anyone in the background. In this situation, it being a private event, there weren't that many people there. And so like you were kind of free to like absorb these cars as much as you wanted to without any distraction from other people getting in your way, or if you wanted to snap that photo, like you had that opportunity. But to be able to poke your head around basically Pagani's newest car and look at every single detail, and once again, like spending 5 to 10 minutes, like taking these cars in. Once again, an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was really just mind-boggling. You turn a corner and see things that would make you just stop in your tracks and kind of catch your jaw hanging open. The Pagani is always that way. Those cars are all about sort of the fanfare they create, the fact that all those panels open in such a way to sort of display the car from the inside, from the outside, the engine bay on that thing, the machining and the tooling that was done on the engine bay. It was a beautiful sight. You go right around the corner, there was another one of those BMW Z8s. This BMW Z8 you could look at right near the BMW 507, of which there were two of those, and see the derivation that was done, the cues and the styling and the overall packaging that was used as the basis for this car. When you see the Z8 and you see the 507 together, you say, oh, now I get it. There's that little side inlet grille on the side of the car that's all chromed out. There's just the overall sweeping lines of the car, the drop top, the things about it that had common characteristics were right there for you to look at and do that kind of cross comparison. It was a really cool thing for somebody who really wants to geek out about the shapes on a car and the look of the car and just how a design would evolve over time. This car from the early 2000s compared to this car from the 1950s, realizing they're from common DNA.
Yeah, I don't think a BMW Z8 gets overshadowed very often. Like the Z8 is a very collectible BMW Roadster. They've gone up insane in regards to market value of what they trade for. I think close to $250,000 for this car. But I kind of didn't even really notice it. I mean, once you look at the 507, you're like, yeah, Z8 who? Like, I don't really care about the modern day rendition. Like, let me go look at the original. And it was kind of cool to see, like, why the Z8, which I always thought was, like, a fascinating thing, that the Z8 instrument cluster is in the center of the dash. It's not behind the steering wheel. It's in the center. And I'm like, why would you do that? Like, it reminds me of a Plymouth Prowler. Like, this kind of seems weird. But then you go look at a 507, the original Roadster, and you're like, oh, I see where they got this from. Like, this is a throwback to the original BMW Roadster. And looking over the 507 was just unbelievable for me to do as a BMW enthusiast and be like, oh my God, I can see where a lot of these design characteristics that went into future BMW Roadsters and where they pulled some of those inspirations from basically one of these original designs.
Yeah, getting a chance to see these things together was just an unreal experience, even to the point where things that would otherwise be extraordinary and things that you would, turn your head around to go see were sort of seen as pedestrian because of what they were surrounded by, right? There was a mid-'80s beautiful example of a Ferrari Testarossa.
Yeah.
And it just sort of hid in the background because while it was parked out there and you could go walk up to it like everything else, it somehow seemed that much more pedestrian, that much more just average compared to everything else that was there, right, that was hitting so far above its weight compared to anything else you'd seen. There was even a cool set of old British cars out there, old British sports cars. There was the Mini Cooper, and nobody's ever made this comparison before, but you're talking about cars with the gauges in the center of the dash, right? The Mini Cooper was doing that back in the day, and they brought that back as well, and that was a BMW undertaking, don't forget.
Yeah.
They were involved in that resurgence of the Mini Cooper brand. There was also a Triumph TR250, which is a car that probably a lot of people don't really know. But if you look at the lines on this thing, the color of this thing was this beautiful turquoise-ish teal green color, but darker than that. I don't even know what the right word is for it, but it was somewhere in that range. And it had the wire wheels and the chrome bumpers, and it just presented so well and so era-specific in that way that you knew that this is something that was really special and well taken care of, even if it wasn't as extraordinary a car as a Pagani or as a 507 or something like that we're talking about. But it was made to appear and presented in such a way that made you realize this car was that special to this person.
To put this show into perspective, people had just got done with doing Monterey Car Week, right? We had an episode talking about Monterey Car Week and what an unbelievable week that is for automotive enthusiasts, and it's down in Monterey Bay, and there are these unbelievable car shows that go on, like the Quail, right? I mean, people talk about that, of these cars on display in the grass, on golf courses, or even Pebble Beach, right, which is on the Pebble Beach golf course. It's up against the ocean. These cars are put into this unbelievable environment that you're able to appreciate them. Now, this is up in Seattle, right? And I would say the Pacific Northwest in general, being a Californian, I was like, I don't think it has that like deep of a car culture, or I'm not that familiar with its car culture in general, but I just would say that California has stronger car culture, stronger car shows, and Monterey Car Week would blow anything out of the water that could potentially happen in Seattle. And here we are at this event, and I'm standing there and just soaking everything in, and I'm like, Monterey who? That thing that happened last week, like, can't even touch this. Like, this is head and shoulders above any of those other events that I've seen photo coverage of. I have never seen a collection of cars that is so substantial in such an unbelievable backdrop. And I think that's an important thing to note of like bringing car shows or car events to the next level is where they happen is also equally important. And if you can put a really cool car in a really cool location, that's just a combination that is so difficult to describe or even compare. And I think that this show, Chapter 1, put those two unbelievable things together and kind of blew anything out of what happened at Monterey Car Week out of the water. Like, this was just unbelievable. And I know that Tom Fathy, that was his whole thing that he wanted to do, was basically bring Monterey Car Week to the Pacific Northwest and do an event right after Car Week where it could bring this sort of weight of cars to the Pacific Northwest. And I think he just did an unbelievable job of getting the right connections, the right vehicles, and the right location to put all those things together. At the end of this night, I kind of remember saying to a friend, I was like, what the hell do you do tomorrow? Like, how do you move forward from this? Like, I feel like I just witnessed the epitome of automotive culture and experience from this event, minus driving an unbelievable race car on a racetrack. But like, in regards to car shows and car events, I've never seen anything else that's been that incredible.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really made it so special was that sense of place.
Yeah.
And to the point you made earlier, right? The car show itself is made up of the cars that you go to see, but it's also the setting and the surroundings and how they're presented. And if you think about what are the car shows that people hold up as iconic and examples of like the best this can be done, it doesn't always talk about necessarily the kind of cars that are happening there or the kinds of cars that are being displayed as much as it is a description of the place. And I think this was wholly appropriate given the location where this took place was in the Pacific Northwest, in Washington State. It's a more low-key kind of culture than California. California car culture is you kind of get out on the sunny day and you drive with the top down or you go cruise down the roads or in the twisties. It's a little showier than it is up in the Northwest. The presence of cars up there are a little bit more subdued. People have these collections. They don't really make them as available or open as they tend to do in California. People aren't driving their cars around 12 months of the year in Washington because there's snow on the ground or the weather is not conducive to have out cars that might not do so well in the elements. But it's that sense of place when you're in this location where nature is so present, the density of trees. I'm not a big tree hugger guy, but if you go up to the Northwest and you're coming from California, you're going to say like, well, we have trees, we have the sequoias, we have the redwoods, we have that kind of stuff. Those are special here. We have palm trees if you're in that kind of thing. You get up there and just the majestic quality of the expanse of forest that's around you. You remember that, parts of this area are a rainforest, an active rainforest in North America. And to get a chance to see these beautiful creations in such a place, it really worked, right? These are the right kind of cars for being shown there. And if you think about other well-known car shows, there's only a few that are named after anything that has to do with the kind of car that's going on. You have Pebble Beach, you have Amelia Island, you have Greenwich, you have Goodwood. All of those names are the place. They're not the reunion of this kind of vehicle. They're not the display of this mark or make, right? They're about the location. And I think they did such a phenomenal job here for this Chapter 1 event and then bookended on the other side, Chapter 2, if you will, at the Northwest Exotic Show that took place in that marina at Carillon Point in Kirkland. I think they did a fantastic job showcasing what the Northwest has to offer, showing how these cars exist in this area and how well they coexist with the environment that's all around them.
Yeah, I was absolutely blown away with the car culture in the Pacific Northwest and really enjoyed my time, even just driving around. I mean, it's beautiful up there. I obviously can imagine in the off season with all the rain and the weather that comes in, but when we were up there, we had beautiful weather and beautiful nature. And like we were talking about, the place that we went to then go experience these unbelievable cars was just a great overall environment. And I think that's like a thing as car people that we love to do, is to take our car that we love so much and we love the way it looks and then putting it into cool environments, right? That's why we go on drives. Not only is it a nice road to drive and to go through, the windy wine country here in Sonoma County, or out to the coast, or up to Yosemite, whatever the case is, we want to put our really cool car into these cool environments, basically take a picture or just enjoy the overall scenery. And so I think that's what really makes really cool car shows and really cool car events, because yeah, when we think about car shows or car events, normally we just think about a bunch of cars parked in a parking lot. But that's where you normally see cars, right? You want to see cars in like unusual locations. I think that's why maybe some of these Monterey events are so enticing, is because like, oh, look, there's a car on grass. Like, you don't normally get to see a car on grass, right? So it kind of adds to that experience. And then this was just dialed up to like 11, right? Think about the most gorgeous house, location, grounds that you could possibly imagine, where you're like, yeah, I'd just love to just walk around this place for, 20 minutes, half an hour, even if there weren't any cars there, let alone, okay, now put some really cool cars there. It's like, now it's like everything you could possibly imagine. And I can't wait to see what happens next. I mean, like, this was a big swing right out of the gate of putting on this massive event that kind of tail-ended Monterey Car Week of this journey up to the Pacific Northwest. I mean, if Fatih can get some momentum behind it and had such a successful event this year and put on an unbelievable event, what sort of connections and momentum is he going to get for next year of people that went to Monterey and they're like, oh yeah, we got to do this Chapter 1 Northwest Exotics event right after. Like, if the cars are going to be on the West Coast, let's hit that next.
Yeah, I'll have to admit, I was a little skeptical when I was chatting with Tom. We had him here on the show telling his story about how he started this Northwest Exotics car show. And it was a great story, but I'm like, well, how are you going to follow up Monterey Car Week? I mean, you're going to have your event the weekend after. People were just down there watching the IROC cars race, driving around Carmel, seeing all this amazing eye candy all over the roads. How are you going to compete with that? He's like, well, first of all, the people who are moving their cars around for those kind of events still have their cars in trucks, and they have to go from Monterey to somewhere. Yeah, maybe they'll be going back to their origins, or maybe we can convince them to come up to our event and show them why it's worthwhile to do that. So I think that was actually a really good strategy. It was something that helped us with moving the Toro Rosso Formula One car. It was already in the trailer. All we had to do was get it from Monterey up to the Northwest. There wasn't a stop in between. There wasn't overhead beyond taking the car from where it was to getting it to the next point. And I think that was a really smart strategy. There was also this priming of people, if you will. Monterey Car Week just happened. So if you were there, you may have gotten your fill of cars and you saw a bunch of amazing things, or maybe you just got fired up about cars in a way that you hadn't been as fired up the 2 weeks before leading up to that event. Or maybe you didn't get to go and you were seeing social media just completely overwhelmed with the sights and scenes of amazing cars doing what they can do on the racetrack and around town and being parked or being driven or whatever it was. So there was a lot of pent-up demand there, as well as the people who had an opportunity to see some of these things their first time through. But the difference was there was no collection of cars like these, like this Chapter 1 event, like what followed at the Northwest Exotic event in Carmel, in Monterey, in Pebble Beach. They were a different slice of cars. They had a different intent. They had a different ethos that was sort of the backbone of what those events were about. And these events had their own. And I give Tom a lot of credit for having come up with this vision, this design, this idea, this sort of entrepreneurial spirit of getting people interested to bring their belongings, their cool cars, to this environment, to this event where they could show it off and be around the people who would really appreciate it in a place that would make it look about as good as it could possibly be. And I was really pleased being a part of this. I think we were really proud as Cold Start podcast to be able to be co-sponsors for these events that were happening up there. What a cool thing to put our names on. What a cool thing to be associated with. It's something I'm going to look forward to from now until next year when the next one of these, the next phase of these events happen.
And to keep in mind, Tom Fathy is a sophomore in college, 20 years old, right? And he's putting on these unbelievable events. It makes me feel so hopeful for the future of car culture and car enthusiasts in general, that you could have an individual like this who is so young and already is so enthusiastic and well-connected and capable of putting on such unbelievable events that, like, oh yeah, this stuff's going to stay around. I mean, there's so many things of being a car enthusiast that you're so fearful that cars and what being a car person means can be taken away as things progress and move forward. And to see this next generation already so involved and already doing so much for the culture, it really makes you feel hopeful.
Yeah, it was so well done and so well thought through. That was something that dawned on me, was maybe it's that idealism of youth, right? That idea that you can create something for the sheer joy and pleasure and opportunity to share with other people this amazing experience. It wasn't motivated by commercial purposes. It wasn't motivated by trying to make money off of people or trying to build a venture. This was somebody's pure enjoyment and passion on display in a form that neither of us had seen before. And we've been around and we've seen stuff. So it's pretty impressive to me. And kudos to Tom for putting on this event and for putting all of himself into it. I know how much work this must have been, chatting with him in the lead up to this event. There was planning the posters and working with the artists and the take-home bags. There were goodie bags to give everybody at all of these events. And it was one of those things where you felt like there was a real experience there. It wasn't just showing up to see some cars and going home. You had something to take home with you. You had appreciation from the hosts who invited you into their home or into their environment to be part of this thing. There was no tickets at the door. There was no admission price to come. If you knew about this thing or if you were invited to the pre-party, you just went. And you had an opportunity to take this all in. And what a cool and special feeling it was to be part of that and representing that as well. I'm stoked on what's going to come next. It gives me hope for the future. It makes me think about what people who are coming out with an entrepreneurial spirit, who are into whatever it is that they're passionate about, be it cars, motorsports, or anything automotive. That's what we're here for. That's what we want to promote and help to continue to promote out into the world and to propagate that. And I feel like we've seen something that was important that happened. We've seen the first one of them, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
It's so awesome to see people continually push the limits and can push the limits and continue to progress car culture in general. And you're right. It's just something that I was so thankful to be a part of and to witness, and massive thanks and kudos and congratulations to the Northwest Exotics team for 2 successful events, right? Their pre-event, which will be an evening I will never forget and is definitely a highlight within my automotive experiences, as well as their successful event the next day. And it is something that I really look forward to. Kind of how do they top it? Because I didn't think that they would be able to put on something so unbelievable to begin with, and they accomplished that. So it's like now I have full confidence that, oh yeah, they could blow this out of the water, and I can't wait to see how they do it.
It's like one of those experiences you have in your life when you're there to witness something, to be part of something, to belong to something that you didn't even know could exist or could be there in that form. And you were there to see it and take it all in. And it's not about the pictures and the social media posts and people trying to get some benefit from sharing pictures alone of it. It was the experience of being there in that environment around this stuff, the sights, the sounds, the smells of these cars, being in this environment with other people who were so passionate and keyed up and keyed into what was going on. They realized how special this was. And this is one of those things. It's a time in your life and experience that you have that you're going to look back on and say, remember when we were at that thing? And maybe it was, remember we were at the first one of those and now they're doing this other thing. It's grown, it's evolved, or maybe it stays a lot like this. And we continue to see examples of these type of events starting to pop up more. I think it would be a good thing. I think it would be a great trend to see people who are as passionate about this as all the car enthusiasts and car owners and organizers of this event clearly were.
Well, this has been an awesome time reflecting on an unforgettable evening at the Chapter 1 Pacific Sunsets meet.
I can't wait to see what comes next. If in the meantime you're trying to get a taste of things, check out the Northwest Exotics feed on Instagram and elsewhere in social media, and keep your ear to the ground, because before you know it, we're going to be talking about doing this in 2026.
I hope so.
Awesome. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks, Sylas.
Thanks, Todd.
This has been Cold Start.